Well, hey, this is Chad Allen, and I'm here today with book camper George Watts. And George has recently had some success with growing his platform. He shared about it in the Book Camp Facebook group. And so he agreed to jump on here with me and talk through it a little bit. But before we talk about that, George, will you share just a little bit of your background and where you are and what you're doing today?
Sure. So my family and I live in rural Burundi in East Africa. We serve at a mission hospital with a big team of mostly a lot of American doctors. Burundi is, most people probably don't know the country of Burundi. It is usually ranked as the poorest country in the world. It has fewer doctors per capita than almost any country in the world. There have been several genocides here in the last several decades. And it's a hard place, and the people have suffered a lot. And so we are on a team that is working to not just bring healthcare, but try to train up the next generation of Burundian doctors to help care for their people. And so we focus on medical education and medical care. And so my background is actually business education. I have a PhD in management. So I help to run a lot of our programs, and I actually also teach our med students classes on hospital management, because in a country this small, doctors are actually the ones who end up running a lot of the small clinics. So we've been here now 6 years in Burundi. So me and my wife and our 4 kids.
Wow. Where are you from in the States?
I'm actually from Canada originally, from
Okay.
Edmonton, Alberta.
Okay, my bad.
So
Okay.
bit of a climate change to move here.
Yeah, I'll bet. Is the climate there more tropical or?
Yeah, here it is about, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it is like 20 to 26 degrees every day of the year. And it
Wow.
rains. We're just at the end of rainy season now. So it's going to stop raining any day. And we won't get a drop of rain until September. And then we'll get rain every day for several months. And so we're coming up on dry season.
So, George, will you share a little bit about the book that you, as we just talked about earlier, that you've completed, really? I mean, at least a first draft, as well as the kinds of the ways that you support and serve your audience via your email list?
Sure. So I have a book on contentment, on biblical contentment, which is a topic that I've actually been thinking about, writing about, mulling over for honestly probably 20 years. It actually started when my grandmother died about 25 years ago, and I still specifically remember being at her in the nursing home after she died, and her pastor saying, Christine, no matter what she went through, she was always content. And it sort of struck me as like, oh yeah, not a lot of people are. And my grandma always was. Like, she wasn't always happy, but she was content. And I think as I got older and realized what she had lived through, she had lived through depression. She had lived through, seeing one of her own children die young of cancer. She had lived through hunting accidents where she had a friend kill one of her own brothers. Like, she had been through a lot, and she was always content. And so it really forced me to dig into this topic of, yeah, I'm not all the time, and why is that? And I think for me it was especially, if those of us who claim to have a faith that should give us hope in this life and the next, and those of us who are privileged enough to come from the West, where we have material wealth and we have so much ease, how is it the combination of those two things allow us to not be content? And so that's what I sort of dug into. And so I've been writing on that now for a couple of years, and yeah, I have a draft of a manuscript that's pretty close to done. And so one of the things that I'm sure it's a lot of people out there. I have this draft sitting in a folder on my desktop, and it's like, yeah, but I'm not an author, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how to share it. And so what I finally did is, your encouragement, just get it out as a newsletter, get an email list. When you get a list, you control it and start sending something out. So I decided, you know what? If I publicly say I'm going to send out a weekly newsletter, I will shame myself into doing it every week because I don't want to be a failure. So I publicly said on like Facebook and Instagram, hey, everyone, I'm going to send out a newsletter every week. Sign up here. And I think I got about 100 or 150 people or something signed up. Pretty much all of them were people that I know. Our family, because we have, we're support-based missionaries, so we have a newsletter we send out to our supporters. So I actually also tagged onto that list, and we sent it out, and some people from that list signed up.
Okay.
And so then I had about 150 people, and I thought, yeah, that's a lot of, maybe more than I thought I would get. And then I saw your advice to just find a list of people and just ask them. And when I thought about that, I started looking back through my list. I think you said, look at the last 20 people you've sent emails to or something like that. So I started looking back. I'm like, hey, there's a lot of people that I would consider like close friends or relatives or former colleagues that I don't feel like I'm pestering them. I think they'd genuinely be interested. But for whatever reason, they didn't see the post, they didn't follow up, whatever. And so I made a list of 45 people, and I just sort of put together a quick draft, and it just said, hey, I've started this thing. I think at the time I had done, I don't know, several weeks of it. I said, it's been going on for several weeks, and I've been getting some good feedback. Some people are saying it's really helpful. Would you like in? And I think I started each one with just a little, because these were personal contacts. So I'd say, hey, Curtis, cool seeing your kids grow up on Instagram, even though we haven't seen each other for years. By the way, I've started this thing a few weeks ago. Do you want to join in? And I think out of the 45, within 24, 48 hours, 40 of them had wrote back and said, oh, great, fantastic. I didn't know you were doing this. And I felt like, I told you, you saw the post or you saw the thing, but people don't notice, or they don't follow up, or doesn't connect. And the other ones are people that I know are notorious for never writing back, or they don't check their email or whatever. And so I feel like I got about 40 out of 45, and the rest, I feel like they were really they don't even check their email. So for me, it was super helpful. It was, and in fact, I even got the list expanded as I started doing it, because I think I actually put 40 names on the list. And then as I would do it, someone would say, actually, here's my wife's email as well. Or what was interesting actually was some people said, yeah, I'll tell my wife as well. And then they wrote back and said, actually, she already gets it. She already signed up. And so it was interesting that some people I'd have like, one spouse had signed up and the other didn't even know about it. So I felt like, yeah, people don't know. Like I sort of publicized it, and even within the same couple, one person would sign up and the other wasn't. So it was really helpful for me.
Right. So I have to ask, did you have an email list before you joined boot camp or not?
I think I just started it. No, I mean, I was just starting it right at that time.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
it's fresh. I started it, I think, in January, and I
Okay.
joined right about that same time.
And so what's your email list up to now, George?
I think it's like 100, it's a little under 200, 180 something or something like that.
Okay. And so you've grown it significantly since starting. Are you continuing that same method, or what are you planning to do next to keep growing it, or is that not your focus right now?
I don't know what I'm doing next. I do want to grow more. It's been a super busy season for me here the last little while, and I haven't focused on growing that. But the last few weeks, I feel like maybe the last month, I've been so swamped. I feel like I found myself focusing. I want to make sure that I send out quality. I don't want to send out one bad newsletter, because I feel like you send out one bad newsletter and A, you're wasting everyone's time. And B, I know when I get newsletters, if I read a bad one or just not interesting or not relevant or something, the next time I see one, I'll either just delete it or skip over it. And so I've been, the last little while, I think I've been refocusing to make sure that, I draft them several days ahead and make sure that I've gone over them and they make sense and they're well put together, and edit them down to make them short enough and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. Let me make a few observations there. One is just the importance of making sure you pick that low hanging fruit. In terms of email subscribers, and it sounds like that's what you're doing. The other observation I'll make is I've heard this from a number of writers who, when they start to do this, um, they do it with the intention of growing their email list, but then there's like these residual benefits, like you connect with people you haven't connected with in a while, or you learn about somebody else who might be interested in your list. So it becomes more than just growing your list. It becomes a chance to interact with people, let people know what you're up to, let people know about your book, et cetera. Did you have some of that experience?
Oh, definitely. And I've had a lot of feedback. And interestingly, it's I every single week there I get some of the same people who respond every single week
Mm.
with a lot of positive feedback and say how helpful it is. And some of them are people I've never met. Like they're somehow on an email list that that they signed up. They're friends of my mom's or something. And these are people I've never met. And I have these interactions with them every single Thursday. They write back.
Mm.
Um, the other huge benefit I have seen personally from forcing myself to send out a weekly newsletter is that what I'm doing is that I take a section of my book and I try to edit it down, focus it, make it more succinct, and make it into a newsletter.
Mm.
And forcing myself to take a chunk of the book and edit it down to like 750 words is really good incentive for me to self-edit. And I
Wow.
realize there's a chapter that I swore I edited twice. And then when I look at it and it's still 1,000 words, I'm like, oh, I really don't want to send out 1,000 words. I'd like it to be closer to 700. And then I go back and I'm like, oh, that whole paragraph doesn't need to be there at all. As soon as I take it out, it doesn't change anything. And so I found I'm copying and pasting into my newsletters and then copying it back into my manuscript because I realized I forced myself to do some real hard editing because I really kind of gave myself a fairly hard limit of really I can't have the whole thing. It's a bit of writing. I have it set up as read this, do this, pray this. So there's a section to read, and then there's like some sort of little activity like try this or do this or think about this, and then a prayer. And I try to keep the whole thing to like 750 words. And so that really forces me to get rid of the wordiness. So I'm an academic. My background is, I have a PhD, and man, researchers are so wordy. Like we're just so bad for rambling on because you look smart the bigger words you use and the more words you use, and then you realize, no, you sound like someone who's trying to sound smart.
Well,
So
a couple of thoughts there. One, like people often ask me, do I need to worry about putting some of my manuscript into my blog posts or my emails? And I always tell people, you really don't have to worry about it. I mean, if your whole book is just a facsimile of content that's available elsewhere, that could be a problem. But that's typically not what happens. There's going to be more in the book than you provide to your audience. So I would just tell people who are listening to this, don't worry too much about that. But the other thing that's really cool about what you're saying is, what I hear you saying is, as I interact with my audience, my manuscript is getting better. And I think that's just a key point there. Like, imagine if you didn't build your audience and you just sent your book into the world. It would be not as good as it's going to be, because you are now interacting with the same kinds of people you hope will purchase the book. And I just think that's something we can miss that's really important.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. The manuscript has improved because of me forcing myself to edit down weekly sections of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I'll point out is that list building does go in seasons. And, in January or whenever, you had a season when you had some space and you could do it. But sometimes we have to deprioritize list building to focus on other things. That's just a reality of the writing, audience building life. And it's funny, when you do get a book into the world, it's interesting how all of a sudden you have a lot of time and energy for growing for growing your audience, because now you want to have as big an impact as possible. But I would encourage you, first of all, make sure you've exhausted the contacts that you already have, not only in the sent items of your email, but also on your Facebook friends. So basically, if you go further into the pavilion, there's a training on reaching out via Facebook Messenger to your Facebook friends. And it's basically the same kind of tactic, you just do it via Facebook Messenger. I don't know if you've checked that one out yet.
No, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, it does take some time, but it does work. So, well, thanks so much. You've been very generous with your time. You're doing lots of important work, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. Please let people know, because I know that some people are listening to this and they just heard you talk about, read this, try this, pray this, and now they're interested in that newsletter. So tell people, how can they get connected with you?
Sure. The easiest is just my website, which is just GG Watts, my name, George Gary Watts. So just ggwatts.com, and that'll take you there. And there's a sign up right on the page for the newsletter. And all the newsletters are archived there, as well as a few other articles that I've written that are not part of the newsletter.
Okay. So for those watching, it's ggwatts.com. Did I get that right? Okay.
That's right.
Well, thanks so much, George. I really appreciate you spending this time with us and sharing with us your experience. And I'm just thrilled to be serving you and helping you out. So reach out anytime.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
Okay.